won without firing a single shot. No battles, no explosions, just one human, a galaxy full of rules, and a plan so strange it left an empire helpless, drowning in their own paperwork. This isn't just a sci-fi story. It's a masterclass in thinking outside the stars. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show a thumbs up by liking the video. It really helps us bring more incredible stories your way. Now, let's move toward this wonderful story. You won't believe how it ends. The Grand Hall of the Zeravian Empire was no place for jokes. It was a cathedral of power, all stone columns and glowing walls etched with the history of conquest. Fire pits lined the floor, casting flickering shadows on the obsidian tiles. And, at the very center, raised high on a throne carved from meteorite and legend, sat Empress Tavora. She was tall, even by Zeravian standards, with 4 glowing eyes and a crown of bone and crystal that shimmered with ancient energy. Her voice, when she spoke, could silence a battlefield or send generals running. Today, it made a chandelier tremble. General Vorak stood before her, his posture rigid but his gaze very carefully pointed at a spot just above her head. He'd survived 30 years of war, 5 assassination attempts, and 1 very unfortunate incident involving poisonous desserts at a royal banquet. But right now he looked like a schoolboy trying to explain why his homework had caught fire. Because instead of returning with an army, he had brought a single human. "I asked for soldiers," the Empress said. Her voice echoed like thunder in a canyon. "Weapons, firepower. A force that could finally end this war with the Kolar Dominion. Thousands of troops, Vorak, and you brought me this?" She gestured toward the man standing next to the general. The human didn't flinch. In fact, he looked entirely too relaxed for someone standing in the war chamber of one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. Hands in his pockets, shoulders a little slouched, he gave a cheerful wave. "Hey there," he said with a grin. "Nice place. Very intimidating. The skulls are a bold design choice." The room fell silent. Advisors and guards stared in shock. The Empress blinked, one set of eyes after the other. Among her kind, this was the equivalent of a double-take. The human's name, according to the identification card Vorak had handed over, was Theo Marlowe. He was not a soldier, not even a mercenary. He was something called a strategic consultant. No weapons, no armor, just a suit, a smirk, and a little black notebook tucked under one arm. "I do more than speak," Theo added, still smiling. "I also cook a mean grilled cheese sandwich, though I imagine you don't do dairy." Vorak cleared his throat, a sound that came out more like a rumble. "Your Imperial Excellence, I can explain." "You'd better," Tavora replied. Her voice had dropped to a cold whisper. That whisper had once made a warlord abandon an entire planet. The general took a steadying breath. "I went to Earth to recruit. I studied their tactics, history, technology. On paper they seemed average, competent, but nothing impressive. Yet you returned with 1 man." "Yes, Empress, because humans are complicated." Theo raised his hand slightly. "Ooh, can I help with this part?" "No," Tavora snapped. "See?" Theo said to no one in particular. "That's exactly the mindset. Very direct, very traditional." "Enough," Tavora roared. "Why are you here, human?" "Well," Theo said, "because your general figured out something most empires never do. You don't always need more guns. Sometimes you need better ideas." Another silence. This one heavier. "Earth isn't like your world," Vorak explained. "It's fragmented. Hundreds of nations, conflicting values, they don't all agree on anything. Yet somehow they survive and thrive." Theo stepped forward. Just a little. "They asked me what I do. I told them I fix problems, not with muscle, with creativity. Most wars follow patterns, but patterns can be broken." Tavora studied him. "And what pattern do you think we're following?" "You're fighting the Kolar the way they want you to," Theo said. "Big fleets, big weapons, dramatic speeches. It's impressive, but it's also predictable." The Empress narrowed her eyes. "What do you suggest?" "Oh, we'll get to that. Theo replied, taking out his notebook. But first you need to stop thinking about this like a war, and start thinking about it like a puzzle. Vorak, to his credit, didn't interrupt. He had seen the human work. In a few days on Earth, Theo had predicted how 10 different governments would respond to a Zoravian proposal. He'd advised a peace summit, designed a trade agreement that saved 3 failing colonies, and helped a group of confused ambassadors reach a treaty by using metaphors about breakfast foods. I know it's not what you expected, Vorak admitted, but I believe he's what we need. Tavora didn't speak for a long moment. Her eyes flicked from the general to the human and back again. Around her, the court waited, breath held, not daring to move. Finally, she leaned back in her throne. Very well, she said. You have one chance, human, impress me. Theo gave her a confident nod. Challenge accepted. Just give me access to your war files, a pot of coffee, and someone who knows how to operate your whatever those glowing consoles are. Tavora waved a hand. You'll have what you need. As Theo turned and followed the aide assigned to him, he looked back over his shoulder and winked. This is going to be fun. The doors closed behind him, and for the first time in a long time, the empress of the Zoravian Empire wasn't entirely sure what would happen next. But she couldn't help wondering, had they just found the key to ending the war? Not with a bang, but with a plan. Krawin. Marlowe adjusted the sleeves of his blazer as he stepped into the strategy chamber of the Zoravian command center. Around him, towering alien advisors, each wearing thick armor and serious expressions, stared at the human like he was either lost or incredibly brave. General Vorak stood nearby, arms folded, watching with the cautious hope of someone who had placed a very unusual bet and was still waiting to see if it would pay off. The room was filled with maps, glowing screens, holograms of star systems, and far too many blinking lights. It all looked very high-tech, very impressive, and completely overwhelmed with the same problem. Nothing was working. Theo took a seat, crossed one leg over the other, and flipped open his little black notebook. All right, he said, let's talk about the enemy. The Kolar Dominion was the kind of opponent most species feared. They were disciplined, efficient, and always 10 steps ahead. For 6 years, the Zoravians had fought them with fleets, troops and strategy manuals thicker than most building foundations, and yet no progress. No victories that lasted. Just a long, exhausting fight with no end in sight. That was where Theo came in. He leaned forward and tapped a hologram showing the latest battle site. You keep doing this thing where you attack. Here then they respond here. It's like a dance and both sides know the steps. But what if you switch the music? The advisors looked at each other, confused. General Vorak tried to translate. He means changing the approach. Exactly, Theo said, grinning. You're playing their game by their rules. But here's the secret. Humans, we're not great at rules. We're amazing at ignoring them. Empress Tavora entered the room then, her long cloak brushing the ground as she walked. Everyone fell silent. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence alone demanded attention. She looked at Theo, waiting. He stood and faced her. Your Highness, I think I understand your enemy, but first let me explain something about humans. You see, we don't win fights because we're the strongest. We win because we're weird. Tavora raised an eyebrow. Weird? Yes. Let me give you an example. Theo began pacing. Your general here went to Earth expecting to find a single global army. One command center. Simple, right? Instead, he found hundreds of countries, each with its own army, government, and way of thinking. Some leaders wanted to ally with you. Others threatened to attack you. One invited him to a family barbecue. Vorak nodded. There was grilled meat and loud music. I was very confused. Exactly, Theo said. Because humans are confusing. We don't think in straight lines, we don't always agree. Sometimes we don't even agree with ourselves, but that mess? It makes us unpredictable. And in war, unpredictable is powerful. He turned to the main display, pulling up information on the Kolar Dominion. They're the opposite. One leader, one structure. They move like a machine. Organized, yes, but rigid. Every decision must go through layers of approval. Every order needs the right stamp, the right signature, and 3 copies filed somewhere no one can ever find. Tavora frowned. That sounds like a weakness. Theo smiled. Exactly. Bureaucracy is great when everything goes as planned. But throw in some chaos and suddenly it starts breaking down. And humans, we don't just survive chaos, we turn it into a strategy. The Empress moved closer. What are you suggesting, Theo Marlowe? He met her gaze. We don't try to beat them at their own game. We flip the board, stop thinking about winning battles and start thinking about breaking systems. Let's not outshoot them. Let's outthink them. Vorak stepped forward. We've seen what he can do, Empress. On Earth, he predicted 10 diplomatic responses before they happened. He convinced 2 enemy factions to sign a peace deal by making them believe a third group was forming a secret alliance. It wasn't even real. Did it work? Tavora asked. They're allies now, Theo said. And I didn't lie. I just gave them the idea. Tavora took a long breath. So, what now? Theo flipped a page in his notebook. Now, we gather information. I need everything you have on the Dominion. Political structure, military documents, even their entertainment broadcasts. I want to know how they think, what makes them nervous, and what they absolutely cannot stand. And once you know, she asked, then we start introducing problems. Little ones at first, paperwork delays, minor legal questions, confusing trade requests, nothing big, nothing suspicious, just enough to slow them down. Until what? She asked. Until their system starts choking on its own rules. Tavora stared at him. For a moment the room held its breath. Then slowly she nodded. You have your chance, human. Show me what Earth logic can do. Theo bowed slightly. You're going to need a lot more paper. The Empress turned and left the room, her guards falling into step behind her. Vorak placed a hand on Theo's shoulder. You're either a genius, the general said, or completely insane. Theo shrugged. Maybe both. That's the fun part. And just like that, the quiet war began. Not with weapons, not with explosions, but with paperwork, questions, and a very unusual human turning the galaxy's most dangerous enemy into their own worst problem. It began with a memo. Just a short, simple document marked with all the right stamps, signed in the proper ink, and routed through the appropriate intergalactic channels. The memo asked a question. Were the Kolar Dominion's fleet carriers complying with newly updated safety regulations for hyperspace lane travel near active star-forming regions? It was a question no one had ever thought to ask, mostly because the regulation didn't exist until Theo Marlowe suggested writing it. 3 days later, several Dominion warships were temporarily grounded, while officials scrambled to locate the required certifications. Within a week, more forms followed. Requests for fuel usage reports, environmental impact assessments, and noise pollution complaints from nearby neutral colonies. None of these issues were serious on their own, but together, they created a steady drizzle of delays, questions, and confusion, and that was just the beginning. Inside the Zoravian command center, a strange new department had formed. It wasn't filled with warriors or engineers, but with legal advisors, document analysts, and interstellar regulation experts. Theo sat in the center of it all, legs crossed, sipping something that vaguely resembled coffee. His desk was buried in papers, digital files, and hastily scribbled notes. Around him, his team worked like a machine powered by creativity and a strange sense of fun. They weren't fighting a war. They were writing one. Theo grinned as a young advisor handed him a new draft. This one claims that Kolar troop transports are violating spatial zoning codes in Sector 12B, the assistant explained. We based it on an old trade route agreement from 60 years ago. Perfect, Theo replied. Send it, make sure it goes through the proper diplomatic lines, and attach a request for documentation that doesn't actually exist. While traditional armies relied on weapons, Theo relied on details, tiny threads that once pulled could unravel entire systems. He called it Operation Red Tape. The goal wasn't to attack the Kolar Dominion head-on, It was to overload their structure with so much bureaucratic noise that nothing could move forward without a dozen meetings and a mountain of paperwork. Back in the Kolar capital, confusion was spreading fast. Their communication systems were constantly disrupted by bizarre transmissions, offers for interstellar timeshares, subscription services for alien poetry, and endless calls from supposed charities asking for donations in exchange for galactic blessings. Military officers found their schedules packed with mandatory review hearings. Supply officers were being questioned about the ethical sourcing of materials, and diplomats were being pulled into endless debates over obscure treaty clauses. Dominion's leadership tried to respond. Committees were formed to handle the complaints, investigators were appointed, legal advisors were hired. But the problems didn't stop. They multiplied. For every question they answered, 3 more appeared. Some were silly, others confusing, but all of them demanded attention. And the more they tried to keep up, the more their systems slowed down. In one particularly absurd incident, a Dominion commander was forced to halt a weapons shipment because of a formal protest filed by a newly registered group called Citizens for Peaceful Space. The protest included a 47-page letter, a petition signed by over 1,000 citizens from neutral systems, and an environmental study warning of possible harm to the migratory patterns of space jellyfish. There was no evidence the jellyfish were even real, but it didn't matter. The rules required the complaint be addressed before the shipment could continue. Meanwhile, Theo was running simulations and smiling more each day. General Vorak stopped by his office to check in. "I assume this chaos on the Dominion side is your doing?" Theo looked up from a document outlining a new fake tax form. "Not all of it. Some of it is just organic. Bureaucracy is like fire. It spreads when there's fuel. I just gave it a little spark." The general glanced around at the busy room. "I've never seen a war like this." Theo leaned back. "That's the point. They were prepared for battlecruisers and laser bombardments. They weren't prepared for audits, inquiries, and community feedback forms. Reports began coming in from Zoravian intelligence. Dominion response times were slipping. Supply lines were unreliable, morale was down. Commanders were arguing over priorities, and entire fleets were grounded due to unresolved policy disputes. Most shockingly, several officers had simply quit, not because of fear, but because the endless bureaucracy had drained their will to keep fighting. Empress Tavora received these reports with growing interest. At first she had been skeptical. Now she watched as her enemy, once so precise and confident, began to slow to a crawl. She summoned Theo to the throne room once again. "You've caused quite a mess," she said. Theo gave a polite nod. "Thank you, Your Highness. I do take pride in my work. And this is only the middle of your plan? Just the middle. We haven't even gotten to the budget audits or the interstellar workplace safety inspections yet." Tavora laughed, a sound that startled everyone present. It was rare to hear her laugh, rarer still during wartime. "Then continue," she said. "Let's see how far this madness can go." Theo bowed. "With pleasure." And with that, Operation Red Tape marched forward. No weapons fired, no ships destroyed, just endless forms, strange phone calls, and carefully crafted chaos. It was the quietest war the galaxy had ever seen, and it was working. 6 months after Operation Red Tape began, the war looked nothing like it had before. There were no burning skies, no fleets clashing in orbit, no cities reduced to rubble. The battlefields were silent, not because peace had come through surrender, but because no one could find the correct form to authorize an attack. And that silence, oddly enough, was the sound of victory. Inside the grand chambers of the Zoravian palace, Empress Tavora stood before a wide glowing display showing the latest updates from the Kolar Dominion. Their systems were in disarray. Ship movements were delayed by endless inspections. Commanders had been reassigned or suspended due to minor legal violations. Several key generals were caught in ongoing investigations over suspected misuse of galactic funding. The entire war machine had slowed down so much, it had nearly stopped. Theo Marlowe, now wearing a formal coat embroidered with the Zoravian crest, stood beside the Empress. He looked pleased but not surprised. "They're not broken," he said quietly. "They're exhausted. The system's still running, but it's clogged, like trying to run a starship engine full of molasses." Tavora gave him a sideways glance. "We used to think only superior firepower could end a war. You've shown me something else entirely." Theo offered a modest shrug. "Most systems, governments, armies, even empires, aren't built to handle nonsense, not in large amounts anyway. They can deal with enemies. They can't deal with absurdity." He wasn't wrong. In the Kolar, Dominion chaos had taken root. Soldiers spent more time filling out paperwork than training. Supplies sat untouched in storage bays because no one could verify the latest safety certifications. Every action required review. Every order needed 6 different levels of approval. Most of the officials tasked with leading the war effort were now attending weekly hearings on appropriate helmet usage and interspecies workplace communication ethics. The final blow came in the form of a complaint. Filed anonymously through proper channels, it claimed that military activity in several key systems was disturbing the habitat of a rare, barely documented species of temporal jellyfish. These jellyfish, according to the report, existed only in brief moments scattered across time and space, and any attempt to disrupt them could lead to catastrophic chronal damage. The claim was completely made up. The jellyfish weren't real. The science behind them didn't make any sense. But the paperwork? It was flawless. According to Dominion law, all environmental concerns had to be investigated before further military activity could proceed, which meant an immediate suspension of operations in 3 entire sectors. The committees began their work, unsure how to disprove the existence of a species they didn't understand. Experts were called in, reports were drafted. Weeks passed. Nothing moved. At last, the message arrived. A formal declaration from the Kolar Dominion, not of peace but of surrender. It was carefully worded, filled with legal terms and neutral phrasing, but the meaning was clear. They couldn't go on. They hadn't been beaten on the battlefield. They had been buried in their own rules. The surrender was signed aboard a neutral station, a quiet place orbiting a lifeless moon. The Kolar delegation arrived looking tired, not physically, but mentally drained. They handed over documents, copies, approvals, and certifications, enough paper to build a small house. At the head of the Zaravian side, Theo Marlowe stood between General Vorak and Empress Tavora, calm and quiet as the final page was signed. As the Kolar officials prepared to leave, one turned to Theo. "What do we tell our people?" he asked, not with anger but with confusion. "That we lost to one man and a stack of forms?" Theo smiled. "Tell them you lost to your own system. I just helped it get in the way." Later, as the Zaravian court celebrated its unexpected victory, Tavora and Theo walked together through the palace garden. It was peaceful there, with tall trees swaying under the alien sky and soft lights glowing between the leaves. "I never thought we could win without bloodshed," she admitted. Theo nodded. "Wars don't always need battles. Sometimes all it takes is the right pressure in the right place. Even the strongest system can collapse if you tug at the wrong thread." "And now?" Tavora asked. "What do we do with our new subjects?" "Let them rebuild," he said. "They're still valuable, still intelligent. Just, less confident, maybe. That's not a bad thing. Humility can build peace." She looked at him. "And you? What do you want now that the war is over?" Theo thought about it for a moment. Maybe a vacation, or maybe a new project. There are a lot of conflicts out there, not all of them need soldiers. Tavora smiled. "I think I'll keep you close, Theo Marlowe. The galaxy could use more victories like this one." As they stood in the calm evening air, no explosions lit up the sky. No alarms rang out. Just silence. The kind of silence that follows not defeat, but understanding. A war had ended, not with force, but with imagination. And in that quiet, something new began to grow.